By the age of 85, nearly 1 in 3 people will die with some form of neurodegeneration. And yet, across Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, neurodegeneration is a puzzle that has long stumped scientists. So, what causes these conditions? Well, neurodegeneration is defined by a slow, progressive failure of cellular processes that neurons depend on to survive. Across disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, actually different neurons are affected, but the underlying basis is very similar. A big mechanism is protein misfolding and aggregation, firstly. Neurons use protein folding so that they can maintain their structure and internal transport systems. However, when proteins misfold, they resist degradation and instead end up accumulating inside the cell and create toxic aggregates that disrupt normal function and increase cellular stress. In Alzheimer's, for example, the microtubule-associated protein, tau, detaches from microtubules and forms paired helical filaments, which are known as neurofibrillary tangles. This leads to a collapse in the neuronal, cytoskeleton, and axonal transport, which leads to neuronal death. In Parkinson's, misfolded proteins like alpha-synuclein aggregate preferentially in dopaminergic neurons of the substantia nigra, which leads to the selective degeneration. A second important mechanism is oxidative stress caused by mitochondrial dysfunction. Neurons have very high metabolic demands and depend continuously on mitochondrial ATP production. When the mitochondria ends up failing, the amount of ATP decreases, and thus ion pumps can no longer maintain membrane gradients. This leads to depolarization, intracellular calcium increasing, and reactive oxygen species being produced more. Oxidative damage to lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids destabilizes the cell more and pushes neurons closer to irreversible degeneration. There's also excitotoxicity, which is a form of neuronal death that is controlled by calcium. Under pathological conditions, what happens is that extracellular glutamate will start to accumulate and overactivate NMDA receptors. This leads to excessive calcium influx, which in turn activates proteases, lipases, and endonucleases that degrade essential cellular components. Ultimately, the neuron swells, then the membranes break, and finally, the cell effectively digests itself. Chronic excitotoxic stress is especially important in ALS, where spinal motor neurons slowly degenerate, and it also contributes to neuronal loss in Alzheimer's disease. These stresses ultimately end up at programmed cell death, which is known as apoptosis. Neurons contain genetically encoded death switches that are normally suppressed by neurotrophic factors such as NGF and BDNF. In neurodegeneration, there is less trophic support and also chronic oxidative, excitotoxic, and proteotoxic stress that turns these apoptotic programs on. So ultimately, neurodegenerative diseases come from protein misfolding, mitochondria failing, and calcium overload, which together activate apoptotic pathways and progressively cause the brain to deteriorate. However, scientists still have not found one miracle cure for these diseases due to the incredible complexity of the conditions.